Good afternoon. My name is Robbie Thigpen. I'm here with my Maya brother, Hilario Cahun, and our colleague from Florida International University, Catherine Guinovart. We're here to talk to you today about Traducción, maayat'aan de currículo sobre conservación marina y terrestre. And the reason we're going to talk about this is because I don't think many linguists are talking about this kind of stuff. And I believe it's really important. So what I want to tell you, the reason we need to talk about this is I've been developing methods to seamlessly combine indigenous ecological knowledge systems with Western science or indigenous wisdom, if you will. And I've been doing this to create a curriculum to teach biology and conservation in these indigenous communities. For me, it was important for my indigenous sisters and brothers to recognize their ecological knowledge, their wisdom in these materials, and to see it treated as equal to Western science. Simultaneously, it had to be indistinguishable from modern science curriculum to biologists and educators. And these materials also have a lot of secondary benefits too, including teaching language, documenting language, and can be used for a whole lot of things, including language revitalization. And I hope that just the existence of a science book that has these multiple functions will make us rethink everything we think we know about education. But first, before we talk about that, let me tell you a story. I learned about my traditional ecological knowledge of the low country of the Carolinas when I was growing up, by living in these systems. I learned about them from my father, my uncles, the other men in the communities, women in the communities, and by existing in these systems. And I know in my heart that this is valuable knowledge. And I didn't have to learn from that in a book or anything. I just know this because it's true. And I've also lived in other areas where I had to live in unity with the land to exist. So I've learned about other ecosystems rather than the ones just back home. And once again, all this stuff is a question of balance and understanding and respect. 1996, I came to East Africa, lived with the Maasai and the Poot people, and I brought my ecological knowledge with me, and I shared it with my brothers and sisters over there. And what I learned is we're not so different when we talk about these systems with these non-Western ecological knowledge systems. And we think about these things the same way. We taught each other peer to peer, and all not as me come and tell anybody what to do. I was there as a learner, and I had a learner's attitude. And one of the things I learned was how to talk successfully to poachers even, and all of this stuff is important. And I think respect was a big part of it. While I was there, I also did some other stuff like helping people, with wells, and they have clean water, building bridges across rivers that were flooded during the rains. And doing all these projects, there'd always be some kind of a problem with the outside stakeholders coming in. And what I began to realize is this was a communication problem, and the onus was upon them to communicate clearly to these different peoples. And that's a big problem out there. Eventually, I started studying biology and anthropology at Appalachian State University. And eventually we decided that I was going to do a stable isotope analysis of the food web surrounding Paniolaris argus, the Caribbean spiny lobster. And then we were going to do this here in the Western Caribbean in the indigenous lobster fishery there. And as an undergraduate, I didn't have a lot of money for boat time and all that. So I had to work on these boats, these fishing boats, as a sideman. Everybody quickly figured out that I knew my way around a boat, and they wanted to teach me to be a better fisherman. And what I learned is their ecological knowledge, and sometimes, in some cases, exactly like mine from down here in the Carolinas. I always had time for the kids, like these here children right here in Chazil Norte, right here in Quintana. And I learned about these different education systems, these linguistically diverse education systems. And sometimes I'd share a little bit of my culture, like teaching Celeste how to make chocolate chip cookies. And there on the right, you see Chickies and I looking at the first science book I'd ever written. And this is in Belizean Creole. And I thought it was pretty good. We printed it, I took it back down there and showed this to people, and everybody loved it. It was great. And it was a beautiful little book. And it was my first attempt at it. and everybody was happy. And you know, you like to hear people saying good things about the work you're doing. Carried out to Key Calker to Polo, the man I spent most of my time fishing with, and we discussed what we needed, what he thought I needed to do, and so we talked about this stuff, and I showed it to him. He said all those nice things too, but they said, you know, brother, it's not going to work. We have 5 languages here in Belize. We got more language down in Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, all them other islands. And this is a nice project, but it's not going to work if you don't do it in all the languages. And that made my head want to explode, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this was hard enough. So I went back and I taught some linguists. They told me it was impossible. I taught the biologists. They couldn't, a lot of them couldn't figure out why I wanted to do it even. And everybody was saying I was wasting my time and I couldn't do it. My response was, well, can't really repeat that here, but I guarantee it was something to the effect of, watch me, I'm going to show you it can be done. And I went back and talked to Polo again and told him what I found out, but I vowed to him that day that I would create these science books and begin doing this in every language in Belize, and eventually every language in the Greater Caribbean Basin, as we will see in a minute, and even some other places too. These are the 5 indigenous languages of Belize: Maya, Yucateco, Mopan, Quechua, and then there's Garifuna and Creole. And they are, all of these different people groups can download one of these free books from our free digital library on our website. There'll be a link down below. And so that's what we got. But we got some other languages we're working on there too. We're working on the language of Indonesia, working on in Papua, Southeast Asia, East Africa, and all of these. Everybody has seen this book so far. Every indigenous group has recognized their knowledge in these materials. And I think we have something pretty special here. We want to move forward with it. And we're going to try and get this into our goal is not just to have a books that people can do with or whatnot. Our goal is to get these books into the classroom. And we're going to do that. But now I'm going to turn this next phase over to my brother, my maayat'aan, Hilario Cahun, and he's going to tell you a little bit about some of the other stuff we had to do to create this first book. Thank you.
Mrs. Felicita Cantun of the Puxical Maya Creek Maya organization in Belize introduced me to Robbie. He contacted me and told me about the project. But before discussing our project, I want to highlight the challenges that indigenous language translators are facing. There are several authors who have written about the challenges that exist in the translation of indigenous languages. Volkerts, Pacheco Salvador, Howard, Castillo Garcia, Meneses Mendez, just to mention a few. I want to highlight the 2 factors that Volkerts mentions about why it is complicated to do translation in indigenous languages. The first factor is the nature of the language. We know that indigenous languages are very different from dominant languages. There is not much to say. It's very remarkable. The other factor is post-colonialism. Although more than 200 years of independence have passed in Mexico, it has been only 20 years since projects have been carried out in favor of indigenous languages. Very little has been done. With these new projects that favor indigenous languages, we as speakers have been able to train ourselves. However, the reality is different. As far as translation is concerned, we have noticed that great challenge we're facing. In our daily work, we can make history by contributing of the development of our mother tongues. Ethno-translation is an excellent way to take our language beyond the everyday. That is why I accepted working with Robbie in this project. Robbie is writing a book that is called The Treasures of the Caribbean. This document has many chapters. Several are how the monkeys, mangroves, parrots, macroplastics in our environment, manatees, lionfish, cenotes, coral reefs, sea turtles, plecos, etc. The Treasures collection is being developed for a secondary school audience. Robbie sent me the prototype STEM curriculum to translate. It discussed mangrove ecosystems, a topic that every Maya living by the sea will recognize. I noted that it is a scientific test. I have working as a translator teacher for 5 years in the Universidad Intercultural Maya de Quintana Roo, and it was my first opportunity to work with this kind of text. I decided to manage these steps to translate the mangroves chapter. After that, I was following them to translate the other sections. Step 1, the material is read. Then a previous translation is made. In this exercise, terms that are not easily translated are extracted. We move on. Step 2. We extracted 93 terms for the mangrove prototype. After that, a second translation is made. An interpretation is made to be able to translate these sentences or phrases where such words appear. At the end of this, you get a second list, which is shorter. I get this second list because there are terms I cannot interpret into Maya. Step 3. Using the elements of the Maya language, neologisms were proposed. Several colleagues and I at UQROO developed a form to help with this. There was even a thesis at the university where this format was applied. It is divided into parts. We have the section where we put all the characteristics of the term in its original language, its semantic field, definition, from which part it was extracted, etc. Then we have a section where a new term is proposed. It has the word and its specifications. We can take note to which grammatical category it belongs and from what source we are guided to obtain it. It includes a sentence where we use the proposed term, etc. Step 4. With the new proposed terms, a glossary is generated that serves as a guide when making the translation and is placed at the end of the chapter for consultation. With the glossary at hand, the final translation is made. Eventually, we will create a dictionary titled Pumpel Tzoltanil Ichilkapeltanob Yosal Itzatiltanob Tialulumil Americas, or a bilingual dictionary of scientific terms and descriptions of flora and fauna for the First Nations of the Americas. On a previous slide, I mentioned that the original texts were developed for secondary school students. Our next step now is to apply the materials to Mayan speakers to see the impact that can be obtained. However, for logistical reasons, it has been decided to do an interlinguistic translation. These materials, already translated into Maya, are now being developed for primary school students. And now our colleague Catherine Guinovart, a graduate student from Florida International University, will share what happens next.
All right, everybody. So nice to meet you. I'm Kathy. Now here you can see the cover of our primary school materials. You'll see that we also include terrestrial materials. So despite the name Marine Conservation Without Borders, our work definitely doesn't stop at the beach. Now to test these materials, we are doing this work through a collaborative effort between Marine Conservation Without Borders, la Universidad Intercultural Maya de Quintana Roo, Servicios Educativos de Quintana Roo, and Florida International University. This map here shows you the different areas where we will be testing the materials, the different communities. You'll notice that we have communities that are near the coast and communities that are more inland. And this was done purposefully because of the fact that the materials include both terrestrial and marine topics. We want to make sure to include communities that have been exposed to both of these distinct areas. Now, to test these materials, we will be doing a 3-year study. And the methods we plan to use are interviews as well as assessments, so tests and things like that incorporated within the curriculum. Now, what exactly are we asking? So we're interested in understanding how the use of these materials affect the way that students learn science. And further, we're interested in understanding how they can affect the relationship that students feel between science and the cultures that they grow up in. So some of the terminology we use to identify these things we're measuring are science literacy, science identity, as well as cultural identity. The relationship between cultural identity and science identity is really important to understand, as these two worlds, indigenous worlds and the Western scientific world, often creates conflict. And so in the education system, it can be difficult for indigenous students to understand and be able to relate to, be able to develop an identity that feels like truly in balance. And so understanding this is really important. So when we're not only focusing on student learning, though, we are also going to be interviewing teachers as well as parents. And these three perspectives are important to understand because of the way that they affect student learning. If a teacher doesn't feel like she's prepared, or he or she is prepared to teach these materials, that's something important that we want to know. So being able to interview teachers before and after is going to help us tailor the preparation for teachers. It's going to help us understand how we can further develop these materials so that we can include and incorporate aspects that may not have been thought of yet. So the reason that this is a 3-year study is because in the first implementation, we're going to be revising the materials, and then we're implementing them again in the second year. And then in the second year, we are revising them again, further incorporating perspective and feedback from the participants of the study. You'll notice we're also interviewing parents as well. And this is important too, because parents and the way that they feel about the incorporation of indigenous language and ecological wisdom and knowledge in science curriculum is going to affect the way students relate to that information. So we want to make sure that as we develop these materials, we're taking in information from all these different participants so that we can truly create a broad understanding of how these materials affect student learning. So for the interviews, some sample questions that I've included here are like, for example, for the parents, we may ask, do you believe your children see their Maya culture reflected in their education at school? And that kind of question would help inform us about the cultural identity in these communities and how the cultural identity is developed through the materials. It's really important because we are testing before and after the materials are implemented, and we're hoping that we are going to see some change in the perceptions before and after. So in addition to that, we are also going to be hosting community workshops. And this is going to allow us to present the project to the community. And this will be where we interview parents and we teach them about the project and why it's important. And then at the end of the implementation of the curriculum, the students will come back with their parents and we will kind of do a wrap up, learning about how the materials worked, what didn't work, how can we make them better, and kind of having that open discussion with the community. So that gives you a little glimpse of how we plan to test the materials. Now I'll bring back Robbie and Hilario to say goodbye. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your time. And I speak this on behalf of Hilario and Catherine. We really appreciate you today. Got any questions, get them lined up. We're going to be ready for you. If you like what we're talking about and you want to know more about us, we have a website down here. You can log into there. Also, you can download some of our bioculture curriculum in various language from the Greater Caribbean Basin and elsewhere as well. And if you're working with a seafaring linguistic group and they live in the native range of the mangrove ecosystems, get in contact with us. We'll try and help you get one of these books too, because everybody should have access to science in their mother tongue. Anyway, thank you much, and y'all have a wonderful, wonderful day.